So, greetings, friends. Today's talk is going to be on the Bhaddekaratta Sutta, the Sutta on the auspicious day. Today's talk was going to be on the Vedala Sutta, but that'll be next Wednesday's talk. I gave this talk last night in Frenchtown, but there was a problem with the video, so I want to have a video of this very important, very significant talk. Let me read the article, and I'll comment as I go along. The really interesting thing about the Bhaddekaratta Sutta is how it covers nearly the entire Buddha Dhamma in a very simple and direct way. It touches on the proper use of mindfulness. It brings in the five clinging aggregates in a very easy way to understand what is for many a complicated concept. The five clinging aggregates are simply what the Buddha uses to describe the formation of a confused and deluded self rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. In other words, the five clinging aggregates aren't any more substantial than anything else that arises from ignorance, even though they appear to be substantial. The five clinging aggregates is the vehicle that we form out of that initial ignorance to experience confusion, delusion, and suffering. And through the refined mindfulness that's rooted in deep concentration developed through a proper meditation practice, this can be clearly seen. And in this sutta, the Buddha teaches how to do that in a very practical way. So the Bhaddekaratta Sutta teaches the importance of being mindfully present of life as life occurs. Everything the Buddha taught during his 45-year teaching career was taught in the context of developing understanding of Four Noble Truths. And to gain release from clinging to self-referential views rooted in ignorance of those same four truths. The title of the sutta means an auspicious day. There's some argument between Buddhist scholars about the exact meaning of that Bhaddekaratta. But when you read the sutta, and this is where good translators are so important in maintaining the authenticity of the teaching, because you have to translate these ancient Pali words within the context of which they're presented. So the words could have a lot of different meanings, but it's obvious that the Buddha is speaking about an auspicious day here in this sutta. An auspicious day in this context refers to a day that is significantly favorable towards developing awakening as the Buddha defines awakening, meaning developing a profound understanding of dukkha and recognizing and abandoning all self-referential views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And here the Buddha references the five clinging aggregates of form, feelings, perceptions, mental fabrications, and ongoing confused consciousness to describe an ignorant view of the self. The Buddha teaches the importance of not being distracted to the past or to the future, and to remain mindfully present with life as life occurs. And of course, that's the ultimate goal of the Dhamma. That's where lasting peace and happiness resides, in being fully present with our lives, to not be distracted to the past or to the future, and to be at peace with what's occurring in our life as it occurs. The Bhaddekaratta Sutta. The Buddha was staying in Savatthi, Anjita's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There he addressed the monks. Friends, I will teach you the meaning of an auspicious day. Do not chase after the past or project your thoughts to the future. Not entangled with the world, be mindful only of what is occurring. Free of distraction, well concentrated, develop compassion informed by wisdom. Mindfully engage with what is skillful. And that's so important to know what is skillful to engage with, to bring, to incorporate into our lives, and what should be recognized as unskillful and abandoned. And how do we do that? Through the Eightfold Path. If it doesn't fit into that framework, it's unskillful and should simply be abandoned. The future is uncertain, and death occurs equally for all. So the Buddha is pointing out something that most of us know, but we don't want to think too much about. We don't want to understand in a deep and profound way the fact that death is imminent for every one of us. And it may be in the next moment, it may be in the next day. And if we can really be mindful of that, without reacting to that, then we realize the importance of this day, that it to make it an auspicious day, to make this moment an auspicious moment. The Buddha continues, those who remain mindfully engaged with life as life occurs throughout the day have had a truly auspicious day. And again, using that term auspicious to mean inclining the mind continually towards awakening makes this an auspicious day. And of course, the opposite is true. It's an inauspicious day when we lose our minds and lose our Dhamma practice and engage in another day that can only further that ignorance. So now the Buddha teaches how to do this, how to have an auspicious day, and how to, excuse me, and how does one avoid chasing after the past? One does not get carried away with delight that in the past I had such a form, meaning a body. In the past, I had such a feeling. In the past, I had such a perception. In the past, I had such a fabrication. In the past, I had such a consciousness. Just to clarify a few things, feeling here means any movement in the mind, any agitated mind state, any distraction in the mind. That's all part of feeling. And that last word, in the past, I had such a consciousness. Consciousness is often seen as some grand cosmic type of interdependent way of thinking. And that's nothing of what the Buddha is referring to here. Remember, this is in the context of the Four Noble Truths. This consciousness that the Buddha is referring to is an ongoing conditioned way of thinking that is rooted in ignorance. And anything that that type of consciousness can produce can only further ignorance. And he's also talking about identification with the self through self-referential views referring back to past events. The Buddha continues, and how does one not project their thoughts onto the future? One does not get carried away with delight that in the future I might have such a form. In the future I may have such a feeling. In the future I might have such a perception. In the future I might have such a fabrication. In the future, I might have such a consciousness. This is also applicable to our Dhamma practice, or maybe more so in a modern Buddhist practice, that there's a reward sometime in the future, depending on what we're doing today. And that starts building this idea of a meritorious Buddhist practice. Meaning that if I do enough of the right types of behaviors, the right types of rituals, the right types of chanting, the right types of bowing, the right types of extended meditation practices, excuse me, the right type of pilgrimage, on and on and on it goes, about doing things that at some point in the future will bring awakening. And of course, the Buddha never taught any of that. He taught a Dhamma practice rooted in deep concentration that develops refined mindfulness framed by the Eightfold Path of life as life occurs without reacting. And of course, if we're engaged in a practice that has a reward at the end of it, if I do enough of these right types of practices, at some point in the far future, I'll awaken or be born as an awakened human being, is just nonsense as far as the Buddha is talking about. He taught a practice of developing mindfulness of life occurs and to stay focused within that peaceful mind. And of course, this sutta speaks beautifully to that. Let me finish that one paragraph. This is called not projecting thoughts onto the future. Again, just being present with life as life occurs. And you can notice the I-making in all of those statements. What was I in the past? What was I feeling in the past? What did I look like in the past? What am I going to feel in the future? What's going to happen to me tomorrow? How will I look tomorrow? How will people perceive me tomorrow? Those are all forms of I-making. The Buddha continues, and how does one become entangled with the world? An uninstructed, ordinary person, lacking understanding of the Dhamma, sees form as the self, or the self as form. Now, the Buddha is referring to the 5 clinging aggregates here. Confused, they see feeling as self, or the self as possessing feeling. Confused, they see their perceptions as self, or the self as possessing perceptions. Confused, they see their fabrications as self, or their self as their fabrications. Again, there's strong self-referential views. Confused, they see their consciousness as self, or their self as their consciousness. This is what is meant by becoming entangled with the world. And so many people, in fact, maybe it's the most common problem, is how we become so enamored with our own thinking without realizing that thinking that we're so enamored with is rooted in ignorance. And that's really what when the Buddha uses the term anatta, that's what he's referring to. It doesn't mean that there's no such thing as a self. What the word anatta, the way the Buddha used it, is to imply not self, meaning that the views that we're holding of ourselves do not constitute a self. They're not a self. Let go of the views. And again, that's related to the 5 clinging aggregates and just the overall understanding of conditioned thinking rooted in ignorance. Let go of the views and let go of where those views are taking us. And again, the Buddha describes how to do this. And how is one not entangled with the world? A follower of the Dhamma who is well versed and well trained in the Dhamma does not see form as a self. In other words, we've ended self-identification with the physical body as a permanent description of who we are. Let me go back. A follower of the Dhamma who is well versed and well trained in the Dhamma does not see form as self, or the self possessing the form. This is me. With right view established, as opposed to a confused view, with right view established, they do not see feeling as the self, or the self possessing feelings. Meaning that when contact occurs, the mind remains at peace. It doesn't give rise to an agitated mind state, or in a general application of the word, to a feeling. With right view established, they do not see feeling as the self, or the self-possessing feeling. With right view established, they do not see perceptions as self, or the self-possessing perceptions. With right view established, they do not see fabrications as self, or the self-possessing fabrications. And that using that, the way the Buddha is explaining this, possessing fabrications, possessing perceptions. How often, fabrications are another word for assumptions. How often do we cling to these assumptions that we've made about ourselves in relation to the world? We now possess these fabrications, and these fabrications, we don't realize that, are possessing us. With right view established, they do not see fabrications as self, or the self-possessing fabrications. With right view established, they do not see consciousness as the self, or the self-possessing consciousness. That famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am," which is held up as some kind of model of philosophical understanding, really points to the root of the problem. And it's these self-referential views and these self-referential thoughts that we insist are me, and we cling to these conditioned thought patterns. When again, an understanding of the Dhamma brings us to realize that these thought patterns themselves are rooted in ignorance. Let go of them. So the Buddha continues, to develop an auspicious day, remain present with your life as your life occurs. Do not chase the past or project your thoughts to the future. Remain free of entanglements with the world and mindful of what is occurring. Be mindful of impermanence and uncertainty. Those that do so will have an auspicious day. And I love how the Buddha concludes this, at least the translation. But I've never come across this in any of the other suttas. The Buddha concludes this by saying, "So says this peaceful sage." What a wonderful way to conclude that talk. Completely focused on developing an auspicious, peaceful day that lays the foundation for future auspicious days. This is just a wonderful sutta. On the talk that I gave last night, there's also near the end of that talk, the song of discussion, which was really wonderful too, and that's on my podcast. It's linked on the website. It's never lost on me how fortunate I am, and that we all are, that these teachings that an awakened human being first presented over 2,600 years ago are still available to every one of us that seeks to actually practice what the Buddha taught and develop an auspicious day filled by auspicious moments, meaning that we remain well concentrated, that we live our lives within the framework of the Eightfold Path so as to recognize when we're off the path, and to continue building one auspicious day with the next, leading to awakening towards full human maturity. So that's the talk for today. Just a few, one announcement. Our spring retreat is coming up May 11th to the 14th. The title and the theme of the retreat is called The Wisdom of Emptiness, and it develops, the retreat will develop the three cardinal discourses of the Buddha, and then with a special emphasis on dependent origination, the five clinging aggregates, and emptiness being the overall theme. So there's info on the website about that. And thank you for joining me today. Peace.